on the programme. I'm pleased also to see my former colleague Lord Bourne and Baroness Wazi, who was part of the small group of individuals who helped to create this very important organisation so that we can continue to remember Srebrenica. And it's a privilege for me to be here tonight to formally launch the theme for 2020. It's 75 years since the liberation of Auschwitz, the largest Nazi death camp, and I know some of you here this evening were with us at the National Holocaust Memorial Day on the 27th of January, and many of you will have watched that night on the television screens later at home, and not just to reflect on the tragedy of the Holocaust, but that day was also to reflect on subsequent genocides, whether that was Cambodia, Rwanda, Darfur, or of course Bosnia. And after the Holocaust, the whole world came together and pledged never again. But who could possibly have imagined then, who could have imagined when British troops liberated Bergen-Belsen in April 1945, that 50 years later, in Europe, we would be seeing another brutal genocide, this time in Srebrenica. I don't think anybody could possibly have imagined that that would happen all over again in mainland Europe. And this year, as you've already heard from Oliver, marks the 25th anniversary. It was the worst atrocity committed in mainland Europe since the Second World War. It was a genocide which killed more than 8,000 people. And of course, on top of that, tens of thousands, mostly women and girls, were forced out and expelled. The theme that we're launching this year is Every Action Matters. And I'd like to thank Remembering Srebrenica for their invaluable work to ensure that we never forget. I think remembering matters. It matters to those, of course, whose lives were torn apart, and some of you are here this evening. It matters to those who have already and who continue to fight for justice. And it matters, as you heard already, because remembering the genocide must act as a sobering reminder to the international community, to us as a government, and to us all as individual citizens, as to what happens when hatred, when extremism, and when racism takes root. I don't think we can forget, I certainly won't, the bravery of the journalists who showed incredible courage in gaining access to the notorious concentration camps in Bosnia. I remember sitting at home as a child watching some of those scenes on TV. These were, as I think the judge in the International Criminal Tribunal later said, truly scenes from hell. You will have seen some of those images if you came to the Holocaust Memorial Day or watched it at home, and they were harrowing. And the actions of some of those journalists, like Penny Marshall, for example, saved hundreds of lives, and their work is a testament to the power of truth and of free journalism in challenging evil. I've also found it incredibly humbling to hear about the dignity and the courage and the resilience shown by the mothers of Srebrenica. In the face of unimaginable grief, they've continued to fight for justice for their loved ones every single day. Their actions continue to inspire us, and there was a poignant moment in the recent BBC documentary on the genocide, which some of you may have seen and which Remembering Srebrenica helped to produce, when a group of British teenagers were moved to tears after meeting some of the survivors. An overwhelmed member of that group hugged one of the mothers whose sons had been murdered in the genocide and said, "I promise to do everything I can to ensure that something like this never happens again." The passing down to the next generation of the memories and the lessons from history is close to my own heart and is something that I want to take up in my time as Secretary of State. I'm the father of 3 daughters who are the great-grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. They wouldn't be here if it wasn't for miracles and the individual acts of kindness who helped our relatives to survive labour camps and ultimately find their way to the United States and to Europe. The work of remembering Srebrenica in their educational visits and programmes have taken hundreds of British citizens to meet survivors and victims' families of the atrocity. And I think this aspect of your work in particular must be absolutely fundamental in ensuring that this atrocity is never forgotten and the victims remain forever in our memories. But of course, it's not just about remembering the past, important though that might be. It is also about taking positive action to change things for the better. And I know the network of community champions that you've already heard of, some 1,300 of them are doing just that. And I'm pleased that my department is able to support that work, raising awareness of the genocide to ensure that people in schools, in universities, and the wider community tackle hatred and bigotry and extremism wherever it arises. Prejudice and ignorance and intolerance takes many forms, and we know that we have to do more to root it out in our society. I see it amongst my family and friends